Hello, I'm Lucy Jennings from the Creativity Patch. Come along with me and let's do some happy weaving. Now the weaving's all finished, and the last finishing touch I want to do before I take it off the loom is make a row of twine across the top. So I'm getting my darker green again. 1, 2, a little more, and double it. Sorta. And we should be pretty good at twining by now. It's a little tighter of a space this time. So you never want to weave all the way up to the very top. Well, it's pretty much impossible anyway. You can do it, and sometimes we do that. We just end up weaving with a needle barely going across. That's what the Navajo weavers do for the final part of their Navajo rugs. They just have a certain process that they weave their rug, and that's why their weavings are so absolutely beautiful with such beautiful craftsmanship. Really lots of details. Now we're ready to finish up the project. We're going to turn our loom over. We don't need this paper anymore. It's time to cut it off the loom. And I'm going to cut it right through the middle of the back of the warp. It's always a little scary doing this. It's like, yipes, I hope I really am sure. Some things just have to be done. Okay, and that loom says, oh yay, water relief. It's like taking off a girdle or something. I guess. I've never worn a girdle, so I don't know. I'm cutting off the bottom strings that we use to keep the warp tight. And now I'm going to carefully lift the loom off. Okay, everything's looking pretty good. These pegs here, they're part of the loom, and when the loom's not all tightened together, they just are loose and fall off. What I'm going to do to finish off the bottom is take 2 warp threads at a time and then just tie them in an overhand knot. Now this beading cord, our warp thread, can get a little unruly, so I'm just going to trim it off as I go along. Now we're going to neaten up the back side. The first thing I'm going to do is if I see two of these yarns hanging out the back, I'm just going to tie them together. Now the next step is to sew all of these ends back up into the warp. So I'll just start at the bottom and take the first one and sew it up. I just take my tapestry needle and I find just kind of like a little column of the weft threads to sew behind, making sure I'm staying behind and not in front. I don't want anything showing on this side. Although at this point it wouldn't matter because this is just the hem. So it doesn't really matter that much. For these knots that are just in the back of the weaving, they're never going to show. So I'm just going to clip them off and let them just be a knot there. And same here. It's not going to get a lot of wear and tear, so that should be strong enough. Now for this little piece of fabric, I am just going to clip it off also. And the rest of the yarn strings, they're all on the edges, so I don't want to just clip them off because that could show through. So I'm going to take my tapestry needle once again, and just like I did with the part down here with the hem, I'm going to take that yarn and weave it into the back of the project, or sew it in, not really weaving it in. I don't know what you call it. I'm just putting it in. How about that? Pull it through just gently, and then do the same with the other string. But this time I'm going to take the tapestry needle and go up. Just because you don't want too much bulk in one area. So I've got the extra yarn here, going down here, and two of them might have been a lot, so the other one can go up. And I always like to trim right away so I won't forget what I just did. And it's looking nice and neat. So all we got to do is this side. Oops, forgot about this little guy. He's a stray. So I'm going to sew him down into the weft threads, or the weft rows. Got to stay technical around here. Okay. Now these two yarn strings have only one way to go, and that is down. So I'm just going to thread my tapestry needle and then just sew them both down at the same time. And I think I'll make this one go a little bit farther. It might get a little catching on there. So I'm going to sew it down a little bit more rows. It's actually kind of easier in the middle of the weaving than it is in the edge. There, that's more secure that way. Trim it off. This is going to be the hem, so I'm going to fold it up and make sure I'm folding it right along the edge where it turns from the cotton yarn weaving to the fabric weaving. And holding it in place, I'll just sew it up. Now, you don't have to do this, but what I think I would like to do next before I tie it onto the stick is I'm going to go steam it with my steam iron. If you don't have an iron, it will look just fine, but I think I'd like to just steam that hem. So if you have access to an iron, go ahead. If you don't worry about it. Now I've ironed the bottom with my steam iron, so I'm very happy. And now it's time to do the finishing touches. We're going to put the stick on the top of the weaving. Now that I have my weaving turned over to the right side, I'm going to take my stick and see exactly where I'd like it to be. Just kind of fool around with it a little, see how I like it on the top. Be like that. I think I kind of like that. So what I'm going to do is just hold it in place and carefully turn it over and keep it right in the same place on the top of my weaving. So here's what we do. We take the first two warp threads, lay the stick on top. The second warp thread goes on top of the stick, and the first warp thread stays on the back of the stick. Bring the first warp thread around and over and tie it in a knot. We want to make sure that the weaving is just right on the bottom of that stick, and when we're sure, we'll tie it in another knot. And then we'll just proceed on with the next 2 warp threads. This warp thread stays behind, and this warp comes to the front. As you do this, give a little bit of leeway so when it's hanging, it kind of can flow with the stick. So I'm taking the next 2, being sure that it is this one that's behind and this one goes in the front. I'm tying these knots extra tight once I'm sure. And then I'm just going to trim them off so they get out of the way. I don't want to cut it all the way to the knot because we want that knot intact. And you might remember that on other projects I say to put a little dab of glue on it, which you can do, but with this hemp jewelry cord, it really keeps the knot well. It's probably not going to come out very easily at all. Now remember, don't tie them too tight around the stick so you have a little bit of leeway to place the stick exactly where you want it to be. Especially my stick, it's not nice and straight, so it's going to need a little leeway as I go along. I'm trying to keep careful about that. The only thing we have left to do is put on the string to hang it with. And I'm using the same string that I used in the warp. I'm going to take the end of the string, make a loop like so. This end is going to go around the string, and right here it's going to go up through, just like that. And I'm going to tighten it. And then it's kind of adjustable this way. It can be big or small, which is nice when you're making it adjust to your branch. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to think about exactly about how much I want for hanging it first. Maybe about right there. And I'll make the same kind of knot on this side. And we're ready to hang it. Now it's your turn. Go out and have some fun weaving, and I'll see you on the next project. If you'd like to learn more about weaving, subscribe to my channel. And be sure to check out my website, The Creativity Patch. There's lots more things to learn there, and I've got some really fun weaving kits. See you there, and happy weaving!